Despite the crushing pain of losing their partners, most widows eventually move on. They try to accept their fate, hold on to good memories, shape new lives, and perhaps even remarry, and there's no shame in remarrying after losing a spouse. After all, most people would want their surviving spouse to pursue rewarding, healthy relationships if they ever passed away. But what if your spouse married your own killer after you were murdered? Would you come back from the dead if you could and haunt them? Or would you think, oh goody, I'm so happy they found someone to make them happy now that I'm gone? I know what I would do. Is the marrying your spouse's killer scenario unthinkable? Yeah. But is it impossible? Definitely not. In the year 2000, Mike Williams' best friend murdered him in cold blood. Worse still, he went on to marry Mike's wife after the murder was accomplished. As if this murder couldn't get any more disturbing, Mike's wife actually helped in planning the murder. Did you see that one coming? Yeah? Yeah, me too. This is the Lackluster Limited channel. We discuss all sorts of winners here. The telling of the story requires a bit of backstory, so without further ado. The Williams family. Jerry Michael Williams, known as Mike among his friends, grew up in Bradfordville, Florida. During his early years, his family sacrificed living by their means in a nice home and instead lived in a trailer so that Mike's parents could afford to send him and his brothers to a prestigious private Christian high school. For their sacrifice, Mike rewarded them with being an outstanding student and even becoming president of the student council, playing football, and becoming a member of the Key Club. During his leisure time, he found a hobby that he very much enjoyed: duck hunting. After graduating from high school with stellar grades, Mike studied political sciences and urban planning at Florida State University. Even before he had earned his degree, he had landed a job back home as a property appraiser and was described as an incredibly hard worker. In 1994, Mike married his high school sweetheart, Denise Merrill. The pair welcomed a daughter into the world in 1999. And Mike continued to excel in his chosen line of work. Eventually, he was earning $200,000 per year, which prompted him to take out a substantial life insurance policy of $1 million from his best friend, Brian Winchester, who worked for an insurance company. He also had a smaller insurance policy for around $250,000, which he had purchased after college, and yet another one for $500,000. After the $1 million policy was purchased, Mike intended on letting the $500,000 policy lapse. But because Denise knew that Mike was going to die soon, she went behind his back and paid for one more premium to prevent the lapse. That way, she could collect the maximum amount of money. Mike's disappearance. On December 16th of 2000, Mike Williams went missing. According to his wife Denise, he had gone duck hunting early that morning at Lake Seminole, a large reservoir in Tallahassee. She told investigators that she had already searched the area for her husband with her father, Mike's best friend Brian Winchester, and his father. She told authorities they eventually discovered Mike's empty SUV. There was a bad storm that rolled in, so the search was postponed until the next day. That's when Mike's best friend Brian, along with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, discovered Mike's boat. But his body was nowhere to be found. This particular reservoir had been believed to be an old orchard, and there was many stumps that protruded from the water that required careful handling of any power boats in order to stay safe. Because of this, the detectives suspected that Mike had hit a stump, went overboard, and drowned. But if he had gotten into a collision and drowned, then where was his body? According to officials, they told the family that the body would surface like all other drowning victims within 7 to 10 days. But as months went on and no body was found, the only body not to be found out of the 80 that had been known to die on that lake, the investigators finally settled on the conclusion that Mike's body had been eaten by alligators. During the entire time of the unsettled investigation, Mike's wife Denise, antsy to collect the $2 million-ish in life insurance money, was pushing to have her husband declared legally dead. That was the only way for her to obtain the money. This required a petition, which, like the good girl that she is, she filed. Judge finally did grant her a legal death certificate for her husband Mike in June, after a pair of waders were found in the water with Mike's ID conveniently in the pocket. Denise was happy to put the past behind her, and 5 years after her husband went missing, she married Mike's best friend Brian. Brian was married to his high school sweetheart, who had been friends with Mike and Denise, but divorced her and started up a public life with Denise. The case is officially closed. With the death certificate given and insurance money collected, the case is a done deal, although Mike's mother, Cheryl, was not buying the narrative. For the next several years, she investigated on her own. She ran advertisements in local newspapers and put up billboards seeking information. For her trouble of asking for the case to be reopened, she apparently received anonymous death threats trying to discourage her. Her relationship with Denise became strained. Remember, Denise wants to move on with her life. She has her life insurance money and her husband and wants everyone to forget about Mike, and Cheryl just won't do it. She eventually became so dissatisfied with the way that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement had handled the case that she began to send one letter per day to Florida's Governor Rick Scott, asking him to either have a different agency investigate her son's disappearance or appoint a special prosecutor to do so. After she had written 200 letters without any acknowledgement of receipt, she began to personally inquire as to why. That's when she learned that every single one of her 200 letters had been forwarded back to the FDLE and were added to her case file unopened. The agency that she said was negligible was receiving her complaints about their negligence. As you can imagine, she wasn't very happy about this. She was quoted as saying, "They could not have hurt me more if they had punched me in the face." But Cheryl's attempts paid off here and there. The case was reopened many times, and each time the investigators found one more thing that didn't add up, but investigators never had enough for a conviction. The list of things that don't add up in this case are alarming. You ready to hear about them? Here we go. First, Mike's Bronco was found too far away from the concrete boat launches that he typically used. Another odd thing was that there had been a storm the night of the disappearance, and that should have blown his empty boat all the way to the other side of the lake, and yet it was discovered not far from his Bronco. The boat was also found with a full tank of gas with the engine turned off. So, if Mike had fallen out from a collision, as the theory went, the engine would have been left on, and it would have ran out of fuel. Also, Mike almost always hunted with friends, and so the fact that he had died alone was strongly out of the norm. Perhaps the most obvious red flag was the fact that alligators do not feed during the winter months. Temperatures below 70 degrees cause alligators to stop feeding, and temperatures below 55 degrees cause them to go into a dormant state as they focus entirely on maintaining their body temperature. The average body temperature around the time that Mike disappeared was in between the stop feeding and dormant range, and apparently on that particular day, when the search operation was underway, the temperature was well below freezing. The theory that an alligator had managed to consume Mike's entire body at that time of the year was pretty ridiculous. On top of that, remember the waders that were found with Mike's ID in them? There was no DNA evidence that attached those waders to Mike. There was no alligator teeth marks on them, and nothing pulled out of the water showed signs of having been in the water for anything like the period of time Mike had been missing. There was also a flashlight recovered, and it still worked. Come on. And according to one of Mike's friends who had hunted with him frequently, Mike took safety really seriously. He never put his waders on until he had reached the point where he had planned to get out and to start hunting. He followed common safety procedures that would have prevented him from dying in the way he apparently did. On top of that, he even trained with an experienced hunter on how to remove the waders in case of an accident or he was put overboard. He practiced in his pool and got very good at it. So none of his death made sense, but it was the only theory that allowed investigators to contentedly accept that there was no body recovered. Each thing on its own could be blown off, but together they add up to sketchy. After all these facts were considered in earnest, foul play suddenly became a possibility. But once again, police hit what they described as a brick wall due to lack of evidence. Each time they opened the case, they were forced to close it back up. However, it would only be a few years before they struck police pay dirt. Mike's disappearance was a strange one, but as I said before, it just wasn't enough. Life went on, and people eventually forgot all about it. But the happy life of Denise and Brian was about to take a big turn towards justice, 17 years after Mike's disappearance. The kidnapping case that changed everything. So let's finally get into how these two finally ended up going to jail. In 2017, Denise and Brian were having relationship issues. They had been going through a separation and divorce for the past 4 years. Their new marriage was struggling due to Brian's apparent sex addiction and multiple encounters with prostitutes, and so Denise filed for divorce in 2015. Brian, apparently unable to cope with the idea of losing lovely Denise, thought the best idea would be to kidnap her by hiding in her car and ambushing her on the way to work. She managed to talk him down and promised that she would go to work, not call the police, and meet up with him later to discuss their relationship. She did none of these things. Now let's look in on what Denise did do.
Alright, I know you talked a little bit to Deputy Hibbert. Just give me a rundown on what happened today. We're almost in the 4th year of our separation and divorce. Another divorce date is looming Wednesday. I'll just tell you about what happened today, okay? So I go out to my car to go to work. I work at FSU. I've turned out on Miccosukee Road. And this,
from Centennial Oaks?
Yeah.
What kind of car do you have?
It's a Suburban.
What color?
Gold. Like that old, it's like 2002. So I walked out of my house about 9:10. So then I pulled out on Miccosukee Road. I was calling my sister, and this person starts climbing out of the very back, and I couldn't tell at first who it was, but then immediately I knew who it was, but I was screaming in the phone, help me. I didn't know if she had picked up yet or not. So I was screaming, help me, and then he grabbed the phone. So I don't know if he turned it off. I don't know how. I never saw the phone again. But he was up and grabbing me, and he pulled my face pretty hard, and he goes, he's cussing, you will turn here, you will turn here, blah, 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 and I kept going straight down Miccosukee, and I didn't do what he told me to do. So then he goes, I'm going to effing hurt you if you don't, you turn here, and I kept going straight again. And I turned around, and I go, what do you mean hurt me? And he pulled out a gun, like a gun, not a hunting gun, but like a gun he would kill someone with, and he put it right here in my ribs. He put it right here, and he goes, with this, and he pressed it in there. You will turn. Well, I kept, in my head, I was like, I'm making it to CVS, because that's our CVS, and I was just like, I'm making it to CVS. So he put it right there. He was screaming, and so I didn't know if I should go in the ditch. Like, I didn't know what to do, but I kept driving. So anyway.
Where was he when this happened?
Where was he?
Did he climb?
Yeah, he was over me. Yeah, he climbed out from the back. It's two, and then a back, and then the seat, and then a back. So he was in the back, I guess, hiding. And then when he came out, he came up to right behind me. So like I'm driving, and he's right here, and then the gun's right here. So he's right here.
Did you see what the gun looked like? Like what color it was, or?
I mean, it was dark, but anyway, so then I pulled into CVS, and he was like, turn here, because CVS has like back parking, and he took the wheel and was trying to force it to turn, and I don't know how, but I just like took the wheel back. I mean, and for us, the fact that we didn't wreck was unbelievable, and I took it back, and I parked right at the front door in the spot that was right against the grass, so like the camera's right there, like I knew, because I go there all the time, that there are cameras there. So I parked right there at the front.
And this is the one on Capitol Circle in Miccosukee?
Right, so we were probably there at like 9:17 or so, I would, because probably. And so we pulled in, and he said, and he kept saying, I just want to talk to you, because he's been emailing me, texting me. I blocked him off everything, trying to get me to stop the divorce. I just want to talk to you, And I turned around, and I go, I will talk to you from right here, because he was trying to get me to move the car. I will talk to you from right here, and that's it.
So he wanted you to get in the back with him?
Yeah, so then he wanted me to get in the back, and I said, no, I'll sit in this seat, and I was in the driver's seat the whole time. And so he was mad, but he held on to the seatbelt, because I had already buckled myself in from the beginning, and so he held on to the red buckle right here. So he's like in this seat, but he's leaned forward, holding the seatbelt together so I can't get out, because I pictured that I was going to just get out and go running, screaming into CVS. That's what I thought in my head. But he held me, and I couldn't. I'm not sure where the gun was at that point, but he was holding it tight. And then he locked the doors. And then I said, I'll talk to you from right here. Well, he held the seatbelt for quite a while as he's screaming, and I'm just like shaking, and he's telling me to stop crying, that people are going to notice, because people were coming in and out the whole time. And one lady, she looked at me, and I was just like, I was going to say help, but then I was too scared. So he kept holding it. Well, finally, he just kept saying, I just want to talk to you, talk to me, I just want to talk to you. So then I was just like, what do you want to talk about? I want to talk about the divorce, blah, blah. And so as he started talking and asking me to call the divorce off, he eased back, and he ended up sitting in that seat, the one like right here.
The one next to you?
And he let go. No, he stayed in the seat behind. So
Okay.
he was in this seat, and I was right here, so I could turn and see him. And he held the gun the whole time.
So he was on the passenger side? Okay.
The back passenger, and he held the gun between his legs the whole time. So that's why I didn't want to yell to the lady or anything, because it was right there. So the gun stayed there the whole time. He finally had let go of the seat, so I was still buckled in, but I was turning, and I was like, what do you want to talk about? So then he was like, you won't answer my text, I had to do this because you won't answer my text or my calls. Please just call the divorce off. I've lost everything, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up, we were probably there, for like, it felt, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So if their cameras do work, they'll see the whole thing. I would cry some and cry not. It was raining, people would come and go. But I ended up, of course, at the beginning, especially, he was crazed. And then as we were talking, I was just kind of agreeing with whatever he was saying. And I was like, I know that you love me, and he's recently lost his son. His son has decided to move in with, anyway, he had joint custody and now he doesn't. And so he said, I've lost my son, I've lost you, I have nothing to live for. And I was like, well, Brian, you're the only one who can change. This is a side note, but his son left him because the son is 17 now, went through his phone, Brian's phone, and found out that he's been seeing prostitutes. They found the website, they know the girls have been in the house where my stepson was living, and that they've been doing drugs, because there's a text about drugs back and forth. And Stafford, my stepson, took pictures of all the texts from Brian's phone. He took pictures of everything he found in the house. So that's all, we have proof of all that. And so I just kept saying, you've got to stop living that way. You've got, you could get us all back if you'll just turn your life around, because he was a Christian at one point. And I was like, if you'll just turn back to the Lord. So the whole time I'm turned this way, I'm buckled in, but he's calming down. And so, but the gun's still right there, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he's like, what am I doing? I could tell he was, and I was like, I don't know. I know you want to talk to me, but this is not the way to do it. I know. What have I done? It's like he kind of woke up, like, what have I done? What have I done? And I was like, listen, let me take you. Let's go to your dad's office. The dad owns the business. I said, let's go to your dad's office and talk to him. I said, I don't want you arrested. I just want to get past this. This can be your rock bottom. Do you think this is your rock bottom? What do you think? So, I could tell. So he was, but the gun was started there. And so I ended up convincing him, we're gonna talk to your dad. We're gonna get through this. And I kept saying we. And so then he called his dad on from his cell phone. Oh, by the way, the whole time he kept going through my phone because he had it, trying to see if I had a boyfriend, which, I don't. He was going through my phone the whole time. But anyway, he called his dad, put his dad on speaker, and I didn't yell out because the gun was right there. But he said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to a meeting at 11. And Brian said, well, call me when you get out. I need to talk to you. And he said, okay. So I didn't yell out. I didn't say anything. And he hung up. And I said, Brian, let me go to work. Let me go to work, show my face. People are going to wonder where I'm at. You call me at work, and then I'll come out and meet with you and your dad. I will not call the police, I promise. I promised a million times that I wouldn't call the police. And I said, and I'll meet you out there, and we'll talk about this. This can be, I didn't say a new beginning, but I said, this can be the end of all this, blah, blah. So, but he told me his truck was parked at that park. And I didn't want to go there because I knew nobody would be there this early, And
That's
so,
the Mississippi Green Line?
And so I said, your truck is there? And he said, yes. And I said, well, let me just take you to your office. I'll just drop you off at your office. Well, no, I have to have a truck, blah, blah, blah. And it was just getting ridiculous. So finally I was like, I'll drive you to your truck. You will get out, and then, but then I said, but it's up to you. I just kept saying, you're in charge, it's up to you. But if you will get out and let me go to work, then call me at work. My work phone is the only phone I have blocked on. I said, you can call me at work, you can confirm I'm there, and I will meet you and your dad later this afternoon. Okay. And then I was like, Brian, I've got to go. So then he went from the seat to the back row and put his knees there and started pulling stuff out of the back and shoving it into a backpack. And I saw sheets, I want to say plastic, maybe it was plastic, I don't know, but it was maybe a sheet and a plastic something, I don't know, but it was fabric looking. And he shoved all that in the backpack. Then he had a bottle, which it was like, those old-timey bleach bottles that are like white with the sprayer thing, a huge one.
It was like a spray thing?
Yeah. He had that, put that in the backpack, and then something else. And when I saw the bleach, I was like, oh my God, I just kind of lost, in my head, I kind of lost it. And so it was something else, like a tool or something, not a hammer, but something like that. I don't know. And then he shoved that in the backpack, and then I said, Brian, where's the gun? I don't want the gun anywhere near me. Where's the gun? It's right here. It was on the floor at that point, I guess because he knocked it or something, I don't know. But he picked it up, and he put it in the backpack, and he zipped the backpack up. And then he opened up a little zipper of the front backpack, took his keys out, and then he starts crying. What have I done? What have I done? It's too late for us. And no, it's not. I'll just let me go to work, and I'll meet you later. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. And then he opened the door himself, and I never turned the car off or anything when we were at that park. And he got out and he shut the door, and then I drove off. I went down Nicosuke just like I would go to work. He pulled up next to me at the light at Capitol Circle, rolled his window down, and he said, I'm so sorry, and was crying. And I said, I know, and he turned right to head north, and then I went on. So
Brian was arrested and charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary, with 2 of the charges being felonies. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for kidnapping with 15 years of probation after his release. No mention was made of the Williams case at Brian Winchester's sentencing, although State Attorney Jack Campbell told the media that he hoped the case against Winchester would help authorities solve that disappearance. Later, it was reported that he had reached an agreement with prosecutors during the sentencing that they would neither seek a life sentence on the kidnapping charge nor introduce certain evidence at the hearing. What that agreement required of Winchester, if anything, beyond his guilty plea, has never been disclosed. The next day at a news conference, Mark Perez, the FDLE special agent in charge, announced to assembled reporters that Williams' body had been found and it had been determined that he was the victim of a homicide. There's not much information on what the actual agreement was, but here's our best guess. It seems to be that the state struck a deal with Brian, offering him immunity in Mike's murder case if he told them where the body was, what really happened, how Denise had been involved, and required him to turn state witness in Denise's trial. I wonder at what point Denise began to think that coming to the police about the kidnapping was the wrong decision. I think right around here.
Many years, okay? The reason I say that is, I've been looking into Mike's disappearance, okay? Literally dissected as much as I could about you, members of your family, Brian, Mike, and his family, and the family when you and Mike were together. Okay, worked with a lot of people, trying to figure out the whole scenario of his disappearance, and had to go back and literally reinvestigate a lot of things that was investigated before. Okay. And again, I had to go back to y'all's marriage and what were you doing during those times? What were you doing job-wise? And Mike, and Mike's employer, the whole works. Okay, what you all own, what you didn't own. And this has been an ongoing process for a long time. And you need to understand that. Okay, I used to know your gate code by heart going in your neighborhood. I know your house very well. I know when you took the carpet out, the whole works. And there's a whole lot I don't know. Okay, please understand that.
talking about the hardwood floors upstairs.
You name it, I know about it.
Okay.
Okay. I want to talk to you about a couple of things, and maybe you can fill in a couple of gaps for me. Can you do that for me?
I can try.
Okay. Obviously, the reason I'm here, I know about what happened today. Okay. And like the other officer said, it's going to have to sink in that today was going to be your last day.
The detective leaves on an ominous note. He's clearly implying that Brian could snitch on her. This, of course, turned out to be exactly what happened. The following are clips we have taken from the trial to paint a clear picture of what happened.
My wife, Kathy, and I were high school sweethearts. We all dated in high school and off and on through college, and then ended up all getting married. As I said, she married her high school sweetheart. I married my high school sweetheart, and at first things were really good, I think, with all of us. But I was not a great husband, and spent a lot of time away doing hobbies and just stupid stuff. And at one point, I found a note in my first wife, Kathy's purse, and basically I came to realize that she had been cheating on me or was cheating on me with another friend from high school named Gavin, and it crushed me. And after that happened, I began to look outside of my marriage. I guess I had a lot of motivations, but it led me to eventually end up with Denise. We all started going out a lot.
Let me stop you right there. We all being who?
My wife and I, Kathy, and Denise and Mike, we started going out to bars and concerts and drinking and doing a lot of things that we didn't really do while we were all in college, when probably it's more appropriate to do those sorts of things. But we started going out, a lot of drinking, and I remember one night in particular, there were several nights that we did this, but one night in particular we started talking about sex a lot.
Who's we?
The four of us. And I I was friends with Denise in middle school and high school, but I was never attracted to her until that point. And so after we started talking about sexual things and things that married couples shouldn't be talking about with each other, I think that's when the spark kind of started between the two of us. Like I said, going out a lot, and one night in particular, we were going to Floyd's, and so Denise and I, we pulled up on Tennessee Street, and Denise and I jumped out of the car and left Mike and Kathy to go park the car, and went down to the entrance of Floyd's, and that was the first place that we kissed each other and made out, and we had our night out, and then after we all went home to our separate houses.
Was this a one-time occurrence, or was it ongoing?
Was what a one-time?
You and her having sexual relations?
Oh, no. That's just what started it. I mean, then it snowballed really fast. We started meeting in hotels. We started meeting during the workday. We started meeting whenever we had the opportunity. If Mike was at work, Mike worked a lot. He really was a workaholic, quite frankly. She was not happy with that. So we started meeting very regularly and having sex very regularly. Eventually we started going on trips together. There was times when she and Mike would go on trips, and I would go and meet with her, like if he had a conference in Panama City. I went over, and while he was in the conference, Denise and I went to Destin together, and we took trips to New York, South Beach. We spent a lot of time together.
What about Orlando? Is that one of the places you went as well?
Orlando, I remember going to Orlando with Kathy. I don't remember if Denise and I went to Orlando, just the two of us, or not. Probably. We went lots of places. Panama City.
During that time period, you mentioned you'd go to hotels.
Yes, sir.
You meet up during the day.
Yes, sir.
Were you ever at your house?
Yes, sir.
What about her house?
We would primarily go to her house, and it was primarily during the work day. We would meet at Home Depot parking lot, or meet behind Kaiser College, and leave a vehicle and go to her house or go to my house. Sometimes not go to either one of our houses, depending on how long she could be away from work.
Where was her house located at?
Her house was off Meridian on Starmount, 256 Starmount, I believe.
Did you ever park at a Grace Lutheran Church as one of the locations to drop your car off?
There was a church in the woods off of Meridian, and I would park at that church, and there was a drainage ditch that ran from the church through the woods into her neighborhood, and I would walk down the drainage ditch, and then there was only a short distance that I would have to walk from the drainage ditch down Starmount to get to her house, to kind of be undercover, I guess. But there was a church on Meridian, on Miccosukee. I don't know why we parked at churches a lot, but I guess empty parking lots. But there was a church off of Miccosukee Road that I would leave my car at occasionally after they moved to Miccosukee Road to Midyat as well.
Okay, when was that?
Well, I mean, it wasn't.
They moved to the Miccosukee Road.
When did they move there? I don't remember exactly. I would say about a year and a half prior to Mike's death, if I had to guess.
And we asked questions earlier about Lindsay Lockhart. Who is that?
Lindsay Ketchum.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
formerly Miss Ketchum.
Right. She was primarily a friend of Mike's that Mike worked for the Ketchums, and Lindsay's the Ketchum's daughter.
What about Angela Stafford?
Angela worked with the Ketchums as well and was good friends with Mike and us, but primarily with Mike because she worked with Mike.
At some point, did you and Miss Stafford also have some sort of relations?
When you say relationship, yes, sir. I believe it was my birthday. It was either my birthday or Angela's birthday on one occasion. And we wanted to go out, the three of us, Denise and I and Angela, wanted to go out. And for some reason, Denise couldn't go out. I don't know if she couldn't get a babysitter or what happened, but she said, no, you go on. And I was like, no, you don't want me to go out with her without you. And she's like, no, it'll be fine. And so Angela and I went out and had a lot to drink and ended up back at my house in Killearn Lakes, and ended up in bed together. And it was dark, and all of a sudden the light came on in my bedroom, and I looked up, and Denise was standing there, and she said something sarcastic and said, I'm sorry or something, and ran out. And I didn't want Angela to know it was Denise. I think she did know, but I didn't want her to know. And so I lied to Angela and told her that I thought it was my wife, my ex-wife at that point, Kathy.
So this is after Mike's death?
Yes, sir.
But is it before you and Denise had announced that y'all were dating each other?
Correct. We were hiding it at that point.
But is it before you and Denise had announced that y'all were dating each other?
Correct. We were hiding it at that point. I think it even started prior to that. As I've thought about this and had plenty of time alone to think about it, one thing that I have remembered is the prior year, Mike and I were on a hunting trip together. And it was at a lake that was dry, and we had to walk across the mud. And there were places in the mud where, I don't know how to describe it, but basically you could fall through the mud and there was nothing underneath. It was basically, I guess people would call it like quicksand. Mike fell into one of those mud holes at one time, and it was just he and I out there. And I helped him out of it, and he had dropped his gun in there as well, and he ended up going back in it after his gun. Anyways, I remember telling Denise about that and how if I hadn't have been there or if I hadn't have helped him out, that it's very likely he would have disappeared and nobody would have known what happened to him. But that's just something that I had remembered in the past few months and thinking about this. But I think it was gradual that we, the more we were together, the more we wanted to be together. And the more we griped about Kathy and Mike, the more we wanted to be together. It just it just got worse and worse. I mean, it just snowballed. We just, I don't even know how to describe it, but so yes, we eventually started talking about options and ways that we could be together. And Denise, because of the way she was raised, because of her pride. I guess I can't say all the reasons, but she did not want to get divorced, and stated that she would not get divorced, but she still had a desire for us to be together.
Obviously, didn't happen.
Correct.
At some point, did the discussion turn to strictly Mike being the one that dies?
I had no desire whatsoever for anything to happen to Kathy. I didn't really emphasize that with Denise, because it was not good for me to express affection or, care about what happened to Kathy with Denise. But silently to myself, I was never going to allow anything to happen to my son's mom. So another scenario that we came up with was Mike and I going on a hunting trip together, and there being an accident where both he and I, we headed out, and there was a deep area, maybe a couple hundred yards from the landing that we put in at. And we got to that area that I knew was a deep area, and I don't remember exactly how I got him to stand up, but I don't know if I pretended something was wrong with the motor or the weight in the boat was off or something, but I basically stopped the boat and got him to stand up, and when he did, I pushed him into the water.
What happened next?
So he was in the water, and he was like struggling, and the motor of the boat was still running, and I pulled off just a little bit, possible at times, going out on hunting or fishing trips or whatever. But I said I'll get back there and we'll go look for him. And so got back to town, met up with my dad, and went with him over to Lake Seminole.
That night or next day?
That immediately when I got back to town.
Okay.
There were a few people over there with boats, mainly friends and family, and those of us with boats started going out where his truck was. No, we didn't put in where his truck was. We put it in, there was a concrete landing before that, which was a nicer landing that you weren't going to get stuck at. And my dad and I went out on the lake and searched for Mike. He was searching and I was just lying.
My understanding, a weather front came through and it rained during that evening.
There was a storm that came through that night. I think we got off the lake before that happened, but my dad wanted to look at it. I think we were the last ones on the lake, and my dad didn't want to give up. My dad loved Mike.
That would be a good time to take a break. Why don't we take 10 minutes?
After the confession, Brian admits that he retrieved Mike's body and buried him on land. He couldn't leave him in the water since the gunshot wound to the face would have made it obvious that there was no accidental drowning. Brian is serving a 20-year sentence for his crimes. Denise was initially sentenced to life in prison, although she later appealed the decision in 2020, reducing her sentence to 30 years. The aftermath. If there's a hero behind the story, it's Mike's mom, Cheryl. Over the course of almost 2 decades, this woman never gave up and continued to fight for justice. Denise may have been the wrong woman for Mike, but there was another woman who cared deeply about him, even after he was gone. Thanks to Cheryl's tireless efforts, Mike's killers were eventually brought to justice. Everyone deserves a mother like Cheryl, but no one deserves a best friend like Brian or a wife like Denise. In the end, it's important to think very carefully about who we trust. You never know what your loved ones are capable of.